View from the Gutters, episode 36. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss X-Men Longshot, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 5723. Okay, welcome to View from the Gutters, episode 36. I'm Andrew Chard.
Eric Mannix.
I'm Tobias Panchin.
And I'm Cade Reynolds.
And we killed Joe.
Yeah, he's dead. He's never coming back.
We finally killed him. We snapped. Probably shouldn't be recording this, but, we're going to jail soon anyway.
It's a cookie overdose, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he got shanked with a cookie and just bled out.
Something
happened. It
happened.
was an awful mess.
We were trying to restrain him. Cookie jail failed.
That was cookie execution.
Yeah, and
Cookie Monster.
Yeah, he's dead, so he'll be back next week.
Somebody shaved down a candy cane.
Yep.
He's dead. He'll be back next week.
Yep, he'll be back
He's
next
getting
time.
rebooted.
All new Joe number one.
All new Joe number
Yeah,
one.
that death never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to retcon that.
It was
probably.
a terrible dream, but now he's better.
Yeah, we hope so.
He'll be slimmer and sexier and younger. He'll be 25 now.
He'll be more of a dick.
Yeah,
Which
he's
is
more of
hard
an
to-
anti-hero this time
Yeah.
around. More black leather.
Yeah, his costume will be more red and black.
Yeah.
He's got the V collar neck thing for no reason.
Yeah.
But they're so cool.
Ugh.
Yeah, the Mandarin collar that
Everybody should wear those all the
has
time.
in the Justice League for
Yay.
some reason.
Even Wonder Woman has it, who doesn't have a shirt.
Yeah,
That's my
and then
favorite.
it's like Superman has Kryptonian armor that's supposed to be like thousands of years old, and that somehow still has the Mandarin collar that Aquaman has. And
I think
Aquaman
they-
supposedly has like old armor. What? Like
It's
The
this
Mandarin
ancient-
collar was very fashionable in many periods throughout history and across the universe.
You're going to find out that there's like some cosmic link between why they all have collars like that.
See, this is what.
gonna
Yeah,
be the
if we wrote
greatest
comics,
DC
that'd be
story.
what's up. Be like the crisis of the Mandarin collar, and like some dude would come along with like a deep V or something, and be like, "Check this out, guys!" It'd be like old school '80s Marvel or something, and be like, "This is what you need, deep V's," and they'd be like, "No, we need the Mandarin collar."
What's the guy that shows up all the time in Crisis on Infinite Earths? They're just, is it Pariah?
Wait, you mean the Monitor?
No.
Or no, yeah, Pariah. Yeah, that
yeah.
dude.
He just shows up all the time.
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, it's going to end." He would just be showing up in different collars all the time.
What would be really interesting to me is if the Green Lantern Corps had Mandarin collars, because most of those guys don't have necks.
Oh yeah, that would be, especially how you.
And I don't
get
know.
that
I
on
don't know what
Mojo.
Hal Jordan even has these days.
He has the collar.
Have they
Does he?
built Mojo yet?
I don't think so. I don't even know.
Because the last I checked, John Stewart had like put a giant like sniper bullet through him and made him explode because he was like evil or something.
No, that
crazy
was
happened.
the yellow one, right? Wasn't there like a yellow planet and Mogo, and in Sinestro Corps War they were fighting?
Well, John Stewart did have to kill Mogo.
Okay,
a
that was
year or
later,
two ago.
probably, yeah.
It might have even been in the New 52 early
Okay.
on. I
Does
don't
it really
remember.
matter? I mean, Green
I
Lantern's
stopped-
one of those titles that did not get rebooted.
It
at
didn't.
all.
So yeah, it happened. So it still happened. And the last I checked,
I-
Mogo was still dead. But I haven't been reading much of DC for the last 4 or
God,
5
that is
months.
so confusing when you think about it. That the Green Lantern nothing from
Did not get
Rebirth.
rebooted at
So
all. Even
during
though
Rebirth, he was the Spectre, but like I can't even begin. Like he at one time many years ago was Parallax and killed, like all of that's still
Well-
in continuity, but it's all compressed into like
Have we
5
talked?
years.
Have we
yeah.
talked about this much before? DC editorial. One of the things that they've done with the trade paperbacks coming out, they've actually edited things in the trades. So, like for example, one of the questions when you weren't saying Wally West and Donna Troy at first was, wait, so did the new Teen Titans happen? Which was 80 to 83 or so. That was like that. The Legion of Superheroes were their biggest selling books, even
Right.
more than Batman, Superman, all that. I mean, those are beloved books.
Right.
That's one of those seminal runs that DC had that, at that period of time kind of saved their ass pre-crisis. And then so...
and that's
suddenly
the
these-
creative team that wrote Crisis. Was,
Right,
was
Marv Wolfman and
yeah.
George Perez. And so suddenly you have people asking, hey, like my favorite book ever, some of my favorite characters, where are these people? And they're like, oh, don't worry. And then so in the individual issues for the current Teen Titans run, they'd make reference to Oh, well, there was that older team or the last team, whatever, and they never named names. They're very vague about it. But then suddenly the trade would come out, and that all got retconned out in the trade. So people would do like A/B comparisons online. It's like, oh, so they like digitally went back when the trade paperback came out and edited it.
Wow,
and they did that with like Red Robin and a few other things where it's like
good job,
Tim
Lucas.
Drake was Robin, and then it's like, no, he was always Red Robin, and it's like, oh, it seems like just a cosmetic change, but it's like you did go back and change it physically for the collection, which is great.
Poor planning.
Thanks, George Lucas.
Yeah, straight up as George Lucas. Yeah, graphic novel collecting, yes.
All right, well, let's talk about
Longshot.
A good collection.
A good comic.
A good comic.
Yeah.
Another good Marvel comic from the 80s.
Yeah. I don't know. Who wants to start?
Well, I pitched it, so
Yeah.
I guess I should start.
Yeah.
I thought that this book was great. It's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think for people who like a little bit of the weirder end of comic books, it's a really good one. Like, it's really kind of tripped out and talking about some really weird social issues that don't really get brought into comics very often. Mm-hmm. And I love Art Adams' art, especially the way like he draws She-Hulk. I think it's really good. Like he does a very good job of riding that fine line between making her look sexy and making her look strong in a way that isn't super exploitative. I mean, this is comics we're talking about, so
yeah. I mean, she's
that
not
can be an
wearing,
issue.
Like, ridiculous stuff.
Right,
She's
I mean,
wearing a sweater.
Yeah,
and
like she's
a
running
booty
around, like
shorts.
she goes out
She's
jogging and
exercising.
she's wearing shorts and a sweater.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing.
And leg warmers.
Yeah,
It's the 80s.
because it's the 80s.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I thought it was really good. I think it's really interesting the way that it looks, because it kind of looks like a 90s comic, because Art Adams was incredibly influential on those later guys, but he's a much better artist.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And the thing that I noticed the most, and there's one panel in particular that I want to point it out. It's in the second issue when Longshot is on the movie set, and you see the actors standing kind of behind the director, and the women are wearing those like weird bathing suits that look kind of like the Baywatch bathing
They look
suits.
like Sif, kind of.
Yeah, where the leg cuts are like super high.
Yeah. 80s
That's like a
style.
very 90s look.
Yeah. It was
in my opinion.
It was in like I feel like late 80s, early 90s TV too. Like you look at all
like
the,
you see
weird
those
swimsuits
like one
from
piece
that era.
swimsuits with the really thin front like crotch panel that comes
Yeah.
up really high. Like Wonder Woman was drawn like that for a long time.
Yeah,
like,
totally
It feels like a
90s
very
comic.
90s move for me. And so noticing it here, like I kind of feel like a lot of the 90s artists saw that and wanted to imitate it.
Yeah. It's weird because a lot of female superhero costumes look more like swimsuits sometimes, and so they're like pretty influenced by what's going on in the swimsuit world. I bet if you went back and looked at like Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues from this era, they would totally be wearing those,
I'm sure.
which is weird to me, but whatever.
But
Well, and if we're talking the early 90s, we're talking, Image, and Image was all ex-Marvel guys. So even though Art Adams himself didn't jump ship like the other guys did, there's no way that, guys like Liefeld and, oh gosh, I'm spacing on all their names right now. Silvestri and
for sure.
Todd McFarlane, all those guys, they were, Will Spartaccio, Jim Lee, they were all clearly paying attention to what was McFarlane I mean, they were all, like Jim Lee was doing X-Men at this period of time,
And
so it's not like they weren't.
Liefeld was doing, or not Liefeld, but McFarlane was doing Spider-Man stuff
Right, so
around this time too.
They
so.
definitely were at least aware of what the other guys were working on. Because, you can look, and it's like Zealot and Psylocke and all those characters. I mean, like Psylocke now, I love... One of the things I love about Psylocke is her costume hasn't changed since, like, 1988 or something. It's been, like, exactly the same. Like, completely. It cracks me up.
Yeah.
I also think that the writing is really interesting in this, and you see things that you don't really see in superhero comics anymore. Like the way that this crosses over with the rest of the Marvel universe is Spider-Man and She-Hulk and Doctor Strange show up, And I'm sure that there's no reference to that ever happening in those books at the time.
No.
Or maybe like a panel.
Yeah.
Where with a little, editor box, like, to find out what's going on, see Longshot number 3 or whatever. And like that just kind of happens. But also the way that he's constantly interacting with people who aren't superheroes.
Yeah.
Like it kind of feels like superhero books these days, like they have the superheroes and then they have like a couple of supporting cast, like regular people. Like Spider-Man has the Bugle office with J. Jonah Jameson and Horizon Labs with those people.
And Aunt May and all that stuff.
But in this book, like he's just constantly interacting with people who aren't superheroes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that isn't done as much these days.
Yeah, it feels a little bit more old school to me too. I feel like in those old issues around this time, you would definitely see more interactions with strangers on the street. But it does come up in some modern comics that I really like, and it like usually plays off really powerfully. So I think that it's cool that it happens in this book. I think the character Jinx in the second story, the guy that wants to kill himself.
Oh yeah.
He is a really interesting character and like a great foil for Longshot in that issue because he's essentially like complete opposite. Like Longshot is nothing but optimism, nothing but good luck, and Jinx has like terrible luck and
can't even kill himself.
He's so depressed and he feels awful all the time. And at the end of the story, some of that, Longshot rubs off on him a little bit and he's like, oh, maybe things aren't that bad. You see the upside of that. And sometimes being a superhero isn't about saving the entire world, but just like changing the way one person thinks about what they do. Like that issue of All-Star Superman that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Where she's going to jump off the roof and Superman just comes up and,
Yeah, he just kind of like lays stuff out.
Yeah, he just says what he needs to say and her life is now changed. Like sometimes it doesn't have to be galactic scale to show how cool a hero can be. And so I think since Longshot is never really like trying to save the entire world. Like, he's trying to save his world, but when he's here, he's just,
Well, I mean, he doesn't even know what he's doing for most of the book. Like, he's trying to figure out who he is and what he's supposed to be doing.
Right. And in that time, he's, like, affecting people around him in a positive way. So you can tell he's a hero.
I mean, at one point, I think it was Doctor Strange makes a comment about, like, how as his memories are coming back, so is his Messiah complex. Mm-hmm. And he makes it sound like a psychological issue. Like, he has to be a savior. That's who he is. Yeah,
and I think that it's cool. I don't know how much we want to delve into the spoiler stuff right now. Probably we're fine.
Yeah.
So spoilers.
If you haven't read it yet, it's your own fault.
So spoilers. Near the end of the book, when he has the conversation with the guy with the metallic legs, who's his creator.
Mojo?
No.
Is it different?
Oh, Arise.
Arise. Thank you. I can never remember that guy's name. And he's like, "Oh, I used to be short, but now I'm tall. Look, I have metallic legs." Anyway, he's saying that he left code in their DNA when he made like a race of slaves, and so you kind of find out that Doctor Strange is right, that he does have a Messiah complex, and you find out why. Like, it's built into his genetic code. Like, he is meant to be kind of the savior of this slave race that he's a part of. I don't know. I found it really interesting. There's a lot of cool themes in the book, I think.
Well, Ann Nocenti, who's probably my favorite Daredevil writer, I think I've mentioned that before, but her run on Daredevil a little later in the 80s is criminally underlooked. It's and a lot of it hasn't been collected in trades. I think there's maybe like one or two out there. Mm-hmm. But that run I loved because it delved into a lot of political and social issues that, from reading this, I totally see, the same kind of thing. You have this guy who doesn't know who he is. He's transplanted in our world. And it's a way of exploring, 1986 America in some way, where it's like this guy's wide-eyed, kind of just checking things out. Like number 2, I think, was my favorite issue as well. But I love just the personal aspect of it. But you have people dealing with poverty and some real life issues, and you're going about it in a more comical fashion. But these are issues that like the Avengers don't tend to deal with and things like that, because you are dealing with giant aliens and robots from outer space and that kind of thing. And Longshot is kind of, even though his origin is otherworldly, it's kind of this street level. Like, you can deal one-on-one with just one guy and deal with whatever like his personal problems are. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's something that I don't see as often in the Marvel Universe. Like, Spider-Man has it and Daredevil has it, but And, you know, in more modern stuff like Iron Fist and Luke Cage and those guys. But something that DC has is this huge glut of superheroes, so they all kind of have to find their place in the superhero pantheon of like, oh, well, if Superman's out, you know, making sure that the Earth doesn't fall into the sun all the time, then that leaves room for these other heroes to deal with more, you know, street-level type stuff or just like less grandiose plots. And it's cool to see the Marvel books because they all tend to be like pretty similar power level. Like a lot of the Marvel heroes, they're all kind of on the same level. It's just cool to see like a guy who's not that powered, kind of a lucky guy with knives
who can jump.
He jumps. Yeah, he does like cartwheels and stuff.
I thought that was actually a really interesting thing about the Longshot character because, of course, he was brand new in this. Like everything was being invented. It's like, yeah, he's really light because he has hollow bones, but he's really strong.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like a lot of weird elements to the character that, of course, you find out as the series go on. Like, he is genetically engineered to be a movie star. So he's like, yeah, he's really light, so he can like fly around and do awesome stunts, but he's really strong for kind of the same reason. Like, it all kind of makes sense as it goes along, but when you're first reading it, it's like, wow, that's really weird.
Yeah, and his skin is a different. It's not
supposed to be
skin.
leathery.
It's like leathery, and it repairs itself. And he has 3 fingers. Well, he has 4 in a thumb.
He has 4
3
fingers.
in a thumb, and it took me 5 issues to notice that.
Yeah.
It's in the first issue. You can look at it and see that that's true. Because when I read that in the 5th issue, I was like, wait a minute. That's
like
not
a Ninja
what.
Turtle
And then I go
hand.
back and I was like, how did I not see that? I didn't nobody say anything about that.
Well, it's so common in cartoons for characters to have 4 fingers.
Yeah.
Like, and I've never quite understood why that is. I mean, I guess it goes back to Mickey Mouse.
I think a lot of it's to do with like speed of animation. If you have to draw like 5 fingers all the time, it's like it takes time. But if you're only drawing like 1 or 2,
oh, maybe.
You know,
I mean, maybe it just makes it clearer. I mean, 5 fingers is a little bit more cluttered, and hands are already hard to draw.
Exactly. I think it's just like a animation time drawing thing. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just didn't notice because I wasn't really paying that close attention to the art.
I didn't notice at all until you just now said something. Picked up Toby's book and looked through it.
Well, what did you think about it, Cade?
I really liked it. I mean, I've read it before, so I knew that I was going to like it. As for like who I would recommend it to, it kind of falls under this field I see of like weird, wacky superheroes. So it's kind of like just like it's a good story and it doesn't really take itself too seriously, which is nice to see sometimes. I didn't really have any problems with the book. I mean, it is definitely a late 80s book. It shows its time.
It's actually, I think it's from 85. So I guess
So
you could
mid-80s.
lump that into the early late 80s.
Yeah. Mid. Yeah. Early, late 80s, mid 80s.
I mean, there's only so much chopping up you can do of like what era does a comic belong to?
Yeah.
Like if it's made in 86, like is it late 80s or is it early 80s or is it mid? Like,
I mean,
there's really not that much difference.
Yeah, in DC it's a lot easier to kind of like truncate the eras because you have
Golden Age, Silver Age, Modern Age.
Well, Crisis on Infinite Earths is like very clearly the beginning of the modern age.
It's a very strong line of demarcation.
And the fans have kind of noted that anything between the Silver Age and the modern age is the Bronze Age is like, you know, there's this kind of weird transitional period.
Yeah,
and they have a name for that.
I think that this comic is definitely transitional.
Yeah, and Marvel, everything feels transitional. Like from the beginning of Marvel to now, I feel like it's just one big transition because they don't have any big like universe reboots or anything. There's like it just kind of seems to like slowly evolve into the modern comic. It's a lot harder to tell with Marvel, I think. But
yeah.
Now, a couple things I wanted to mention, a couple little moments that stood out for me. They actually mentioned the multiverse in this comic, which is awesome because like Marvel has always had a multiverse, but you don't normally see people talking about it. I mean, unless you read The Exiles. And the other one was the Blackout. And all of a sudden you go to the interior of the Daily Bugle and you don't really realize it. And then it's like, and somebody, I think was it Robbie or somebody?
Yeah, I think
said,
so.
"Go ahead, Jonah, say it," and Jonah was like, "It's Spider-Man's fault."
Spider-Man's
Manhattan's
fault.
in the dark. It'll be chaos. Crime reign's gonna skyrocket. And then somebody in the background is thinking, "Go ahead, Jameson, say it." And he's like, "Must be Spider-Man's fault." I think that's actually Peter Parker who's thinking it in the background.
Oh, yeah, could be. It's hard to tell because they're like blue and black
Yeah.
because it's supposed to be in the dark.
Well, like Robbie's standing right behind Jameson, lighting
Yeah.
a cigar,
Yeah.
and then somebody else is standing behind him,
Right.
and it's not clear who the thought bubble is going to.
Yeah.
But later on, when in the next issue, when it's showing the reaction to the blackouts, and like She-Hulk's getting ready to go on her run, and Peter Parker's sitting there, and he's like, "I wanted to, where is it? Where was I during those dark romantic blackout hours with my publisher Jameson at the Daily Bugle?
Yeah.
Sheesh, what a waste." So I think that's supposed to be Peter in
Yeah,
the background,
could
who's thinking, "Go on, Jameson, say it."
Yeah.
Gotcha. But yeah, those, yeah.
You gotta love the smoking too. That's clearly like, dates it from the 80s or 90s because
Yeah.
they're he's got the cigar and Robbie's got his pipe. He's lighting up. It's
Yeah.
like they don't allow that kind of thing now in
Yeah.
the mainstream books.
It's weird because, like, the Comics Code Authority isn't really around anymore.
Well, even the Comics Code didn't have a problem with. I know with Marvel, Joe Quesada's the one that put a hard line down because his mother, I think, died of cancer. Because even in like the early '90s, like people like
Wolverine
Gambit,
used to
Wolverine used to
smoke
chain smoke.
cigars
Well,
all the
Wolverine
time.
was always like, he's got a healing factor, whatever. Anytime he
Yeah.
gets cancer, he just cures
Yeah.
it, whatever. And like, Gambit's some bad boy, so he's supposed to look sexy.
Yeah.
So really, it was Quesada coming in that actually, and so that was only
see.
been about 10 or 12 years that's
Yeah.
really been a thing. But it's slowly been downplayed over the years because the kids.
Well, yeah, and they can't really show it as much on TV. So makes sense, I guess. But it's kind of, it is funny to watch or read older stuff.
Yeah, I think it goes down to like, editorial being like, I mean, not necessarily comic book editorial, but an overarching editorial, throughout the U.S. that is like, people are going to look up to this.
Yeah.
And so we do have to set some kind of a good image.
Yeah. I don't know. I had a really hard time with this book. I like it. Like, I like the story. I think that it's fun and it's like reminds me of reading old 80s Marvel comics, but I feel like this is kind of the era that I wasn't really that interested in Marvel comics. This came out the year I was born. So when I read stuff around this time, I was probably like 13 or 14 maybe, and was already reading Grant Morrison's New X-Men was coming out like pretty soon after that, because I think that started in 2000.
It was 2001 or 2002.
Yeah, I think
it was after the movie.
So yeah,
First
I was
movie.
probably reading the run leading up to Grant Morrison's X-Men stuff, and Uncanny X-Men, and so I was like a lot further along.
Magneto Wars, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that would have been
I guess
like
I can see that.
Claremont Lobdell stuff.
Yeah, it was like a lot further along in the Marvel X-Men stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember going back and reading these and just always being confused by what was going on because I didn't have as much context. Like, you'd go back and read excuse me, you go back and read issues of like X-Men, and you just like random weird shit would be going on. I remember reading an issue once where like Sabretooth is a clone and Beast and Rogue are fighting him for some reason, and it was like really, I just remember the continuity being like really confusing with X-Men for a long time because I couldn't get all these back issues, and it's not like it is now where you can just read all the digital and there were no trades of this stuff. So I was just a kid trying to go back and collect stuff like this.
It must have been the Scott Lobdell stuff, the early 90s stuff.
Yeah, I have
No idea.
There's a
what it
period
was.
where he Sabretooth was like at the mansion and they were trying to like cure him or something.
Well,
and he,
they
like,
had him
mask on and stuff.
chained up for a while,
Yeah.
and then he ended up joining the team for a little bit, but he was like under control somehow.
Yeah, they had like a mouth guard on him and all kinds of stuff.
Which was, I think it was around the same time that Mystique was on X Factor against her will. Like, she had a control
Yeah.
collar on.
It's kind of like that, almost like that Suicide Squad type of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
what did I say? But it was even more. Yeah.
It was just like, I remember picking up lone issues and just being constantly confused by it, like much like you would with modern comics too. I mean, like, you kind of have to read them.
Well, the X-Men
in
has
order.
a very convoluted
and
history.
yeah,
so many
it's
status
just,
quo
like,
changes.
Yeah, it's hard to.
I would
keep
pick up issues and not even know who the characters were. And the nice thing about this is, Longshot's invented in this story, so you're reading the origin. But in a weird way, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like a part of a bigger universe, and it's something I've always really liked about X-Men, is, like, for somehow they allow you to believe that this stuff has always been around. Like, this isn't a retcon. They're not going back and saying, oh, remember this thing? Like, oh, it used to be there. Like, this is just... It tells you about a universe that you've never seen before, and because they do it in such a way, like it's set in the X-Men universe, you're like, oh yeah, that's always been there. And it's like to the greater extent of the Marvel universe too, like with the multiverse and with the like future possible futures, like Days of Future Past and Future Imperfect. Like they've always had this huge lineage of possibilities, and so when you read it, you're like, oh, is this something I'm supposed to know about? Am I supposed to know who Mojo is? Like, I always kind of get that feeling from older X-Men stuff.
Well, like one of the interesting notes I think that they throw into this is Spiral hates Longshot and you never find out why.
Yeah.
Like just throughout the entire comic, she's like, I fucking hate that guy.
Yeah.
I want to kill him.
Right.
And you don't like...
And you don't really
They
know
never address it.
much about her either.
Yeah.
Because,
And like in later stuff, they've revealed like why that is.
Right.
But it's just kind of, I mean, it's world building. It's like,
Right.
here's this character and she she hates Longshot.
Yeah.
And it makes it feel like these are characters that already exist and are going along. Like they just
like
didn't
you're
spring
watching
up out of anywhere.
Act 2 of an Act 3 of a 3-act play or whatever, and like you didn't get to catch Act 1. And
Exactly.
you like may never know what happened in that. But now you're excited for Act 3 because you're like, maybe some of those things will be revealed. I really like that. We talked about that when we were talking about Fear Agent, is like, I think that that's something that really smart writers will do, is just give you a little bit of information and make you want more.
Yeah.
And that's totally what this book does, is like, now I want to go read more about Longshot and read more about Mojo and,
What did you guys think about the character of Mojo? Because I kind of feel like he's been balderized over the years, like turned into much more of a comedic figure, where in this, he and the other spineless ones are like, they're a lot more menacing than I think that they've ever been since.
They're pretty dark.
Yeah, he's taken as more of as a joke these days, which is funny considering kind of where we've gone with TV and reality TV. He should seem more sinister now. You know what I mean? Like it's more prophetic that way. But that was a trip for me. Is like, I hadn't read this before and I've read tons of X-Men stuff, and so I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the first appearance of the Mojoverse and all this, not just Longshot. That entire section of the Marvel universe is huge in the X-Men. I mean, you've seen Mojo countless times since, and it's never quite had the same impact. Well, part of it is like they do like the X-Babies thing.
Right.
They kind of did that to death, and now I love Scotty Young, but it's always the cutesy like little guys now.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it should be like disturbing and kind of frightening, and it's like
Mojo is really disturbing. I also feel like, as much as he is a villain in this, like he's just insane.
Yeah, he's just fucking evil.
He's just crazy. Like he forgets what he's doing halfway through doing something,
making people wear masks of him, and then he's like, "Why are you mocking me wearing this mask of me?"
He makes all those people build the statues of him, and then he's like, "Why are they building statues of me?" And what's her name, Spiral?
Yeah,
is like, you said, you want your face everywhere.
Yeah,
and he's like, no, and he starts like burning people alive and destroying stuff. Like he's just insane. It kind of reminds me of he has no grasp on reality. Obviously he's from a different reality than ours, but even in his reality, like he is basically a king-ish.
Well, I kind of feel like it's a critique of both TV producers, but also, kind of capitalism and wealth. Like after he burns all those people to death, he's like, what a pretty sunset. Yeah. How lovely the colors that caress this planet. I own that sun, don't I?
Yeah.
Like, he just assumes that everything belongs to him and is there for his use. And if he wants to do this and then do that, like, that's fine because he owns it all. Like, it belongs to him. It's there for him to build up or destroy as he wants.
He doesn't understand really, like, how the universe works, which is kind of how I feel about people who are insanely rich or insanely famous, Like, they lose all grasp of reality. There's the great Kevin Smith, Evening with Kevin Smith, when he's talking about Prince. He's talking about how Prince, like, it's the Prince universe because he doesn't understand how things work, and he'll just tell his henchmen people, the people that work for Prince, like, I want a camel.
It's 3 in the morning.
Yeah, it's
and
3 in the
I want a
morning,
camel.
and we can't get you a camel right now. Like we have to ship it out here, and he just doesn't understand because he's like, well, I'm rich and powerful. I can do whatever I want. And it's like it's really funny. You should watch that Evening with Kevin Smith.
I haven't seen it,
but it's essentially
great.
like it really reminded me of that, where it's just like
Chalkin' Man.
you have
Real Man.
you have no idea how the universe works, and like Mojo has no grasp of reality, and it makes him scary.
Yeah, which
but
is
it
really
doesn't
interesting
make
because
him
he's
villainous.
from a reality where like that is how it works. Like he wants something and then it happens. Like
Right.
I want a race of men, of demons in their reality who will make movies and fight for me and
Right.
will just kill them if I decide I don't want them. Like
Right.
whatever he wants, that's just what happens.
Right.
And that's what's so scary for him.
Right.
To me, about him is that he's a person from a place where that is the reality.
Yeah,
And then he's coming to our dimension and enforcing that reality on our own world.
Right.
And like all of these people just suddenly like turn around and start doing what he says.
Yeah.
And then he just kills them all. And it's so utterly amoral.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is he really villainous, or is he just like? I mean, it's hard to really like peg him down. Like, he is villainous because he has no empathy for any other creature.
It's
Like,
I think
it's
I've heard this referred to
insane
as
selfishness.
blue and orange morality.
Yeah.
Like it's not black or white. It's completely outside of the
Right.
the context of what we consider normal reality.
Yeah.
And so from our standpoint, like yes, he is villainous. He is
Yeah.
evil as shit.
Right.
But from his perspective, like is he evil or is that just what he is?
That's just how his universe works.
The thing that they've delved into, not as much in this story, but they do go into later with Mojo, is I mean, I'm not going to say he's a tragic figure because he's such a piece of shit, but like he's a slave to the ratings, so it's kind of like, and again, it doesn't excuse anything he does, but like he has this constant fear that, you know what I mean, like, oh my gosh, I need to have these actors and they need to do this thing, and if they don't, like the ratings are going to drop, and like because later on they do introduce Mojo to the sequel, who's one of the stupidest characters ever, but he actually kills Mojo, and of course Mojo comes back because no one stays dead in comic books, but he's like, I'm Mojo to the sequel, bitch. like even bigger and better with better effects and all that. So like that universe is just that absurd, but he is a slave to the ratings, to the people of the Mojoverse. That's kind of like the power, the fuel that he needs is that adulation, and he knows he has to do certain things to get it. That's why like he always captures the X-Men. They end up being like just super popular in Mojo world. So just randomly be like, I'm just going to kidnap the X-Men and
we
make
need
you fight to the
ratings.
death because people love that shit.
Right, and it's funny because you don't see any of that in this. In the birth of Mojo,
No.
you like don't see the people that are above him at all.
Right.
Like that doesn't come up ever, and so it makes him seem more self-motivated in this one.
Definitely.
He's doing it for
Definitely.
himself in this, which does make him creepier and more villainous.
Yeah,
and when he has overlords later, it's like, okay, well, he's not as,
The thing that always gets me in this is the dog with its head on backwards.
Yeah.
It's like there's no wounds, it's as if it grew that way. Like presumably somewhere off panel, like Mojo just flipped that dog's head around because he thought it would be cool, and it's so disturbing. And all the shit with Rita being chained up, and she's like screaming a scream that can't be heard because she's seen her eyes have seen too much.
Yeah, well, he like flies her through the multiverse, sort of.
Yeah. Like he's an incredibly creepy, disturbing character throughout this entire series, and I feel like so much of that has been lost in the intervening years.
I agree with that for sure.
Yeah,
and I think it's like he's self-motivated in this one.
Yeah, and I mean when you look back at it, he is a psychopath basically. It's very what we would look at nowadays as very disturbing, but you don't get that feeling in the book until afterwards.
Yeah, it takes a while for you to like really dig into what Mojo is all about, and he just gets creepier as it goes on.
He really does.
Yeah,
he's a character you don't really want to think about that much.
No, well, you don't see him very much in the beginning too. Like you're busy dealing with all these mutant guys that show up, and Magog, the weird pup thing.
Yeah,
that turns into a giant monster has multiple. I love it when he gets like fully grown and has like multiple arms.
Yeah, he's got
stuff.
the big
like,
furry arms, and he's got the little creepy like chicken
great.
arms.
He's got a great design.
Yeah.
Like, he just keeps getting cooler looking as the book. I mean, like creepier and weirder looking, but like really cool art design that goes on in this book. The colors really throw me off in this book, and I know we've talked about color a lot in previous episodes, so I don't want to get too into it, but the Walt Simonson Thor stuff, which came out basically 2 years after this,
or before this,
was
actually.
it 2 years before?
I think it was his run began in '83 and went through like I want to say '86 or '87.
Okay, I think the colors in that were better than in this, and so this feels
there's
like
an awful lot of
rushed.
magenta that gets used in this.
It just feels really rushed, and I feel
it always made it feel weird and otherworldly to me. Because especially, like, you see a lot of the magenta stuff when it's flashing back.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that's because it's supposed to be a flashback or because it's on Longshot's home world or in the Mojoverse, I guess. And it's supposed to have that feel or not.
Right. I like that. Like, I like the otherworldly feeling of, like, the Mojoverse being different. But I feel like a lot of the colors in this are just, they feel rushed and slapped on and, like, not as carefully picked as the stuff in Walt Simonson's
definitely
story.
not as much separation.
And there's probably not as big a budget on this book as there was on Thor, because that's like one of their main titles, and this is just a miniseries. So I'm not surprised by that, but I would be interested to see somebody go and recolor this in a modern style, just because.
Yeah, and I know I checked, Mannix has the newer hardcover, and I checked to see if they'd recolored it, and the colors are kind of like remastered, like it doesn't have that halftone print anymore. But they're still all the same colors.
Yeah, it's just like modern printing methods with the original colors. And it's on glossy paper and
it looks like they
hardcover.
kept the plates the same.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think the colors really took me out of this book because the art's awesome. And like looking through the pencils at the end of the book, because the version that I picked up has like a bunch of back matter in it. And it's got like all the layouts and the thumbnails and the pencils and character designs and all that. And it's like really, really awesome stuff. And
the one I have that's an old one has an introduction, but that's it.
Yeah, the back matter in this one is really cool. I'm sure it's the same stuff that's in the hardcover because this is the paperback of the new printing. And it's just great to see that art, in its original penciled and inked form. And I really like that. So I would have loved to either see this in black and white or with modern colors, or like we've talked about before, being able to choose, If
you like Art Adams' style, after this, he started working on Excalibur, which was a bigger title and went for longer. Yeah. So you might check that out.
And it's got, I really like Excalibur. I remember reading that. It's got some of my favorite characters in it. Nightcrawler and
Kitty Pryde,
Rachel
Summers,
or
Rachel
Captain Britain.
Captain.
Captain.
I have a weird soft spot for Captain Britain. I'm not gonna lie.
That family is really interesting.
The whole Marvel 616 thing actually started in Captain Britain because there's a Captain Britain Corps, and he is a Captain Britain of Earth 616. Like that's where that name comes from.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the Captain Britain, especially like his solo stuff, really explores the multiverse.
Yeah.
Because I've got a lot of there's two really nice big hardcovers that they've done. That's the UK stuff that until then had never been in the United States, and it's got like a pre-Psylocke Betsy Braddock who at that point isn't even referenced as being a mutant, and she's like blonde and doesn't. Well,
it's his sister. At all. Well, because it's before she stole the other body.
Yeah, well, she didn't steal it. Spiral actually put her into a different body against her will.
Yeah, the Mandarin had her,
I think,
kidnapped. Yeah, it was during, what was the name of that crossover? In the late 80s, they did this kind of Villains United kind of thing.
Oh, was it Acts of Vengeance?
Acts of Vengeance, yes. Acts of Vengeance. It was during Acts of Vengeance. And yeah, her eyes got like replaced with cameras. I believe that was a Mojo.
Yeah, that happened earlier, and then I think later they did a full body job on her.
Because when she came out in the X-Men, she did have like the purple hair, and she was still British at that point. But she looked, she suddenly, because in the 90s they brought this lady Kawan in that was supposed to be like her original British body, but she was like the spirit of like the Asian lady whose body she stole. They basically switched bodies, and then Kawan or whatever died. Revenge went by Revenge, I think was her like X-Men name. And Revenge died of the legacy virus, so they just kind of like, let's just get rid of that. That was dumb.
Weird. Yeah.
Yeah, convoluted. Love
well, yeah, because she was originally like blonde British.
Yeah, just stuffy
sister
British.
of Captain Britain.
Yeah,
and
Psylocke's gone through a lot of permutations.
Yeah,
that's one of my
couple different costumes.
One of my
her
complaints.
characterization on X-Force in the last few years has been really good.
Yeah, well, she's been pretty great. I feel like for I don't know.
She went through some really bad times.
Yeah, I think.
And at one point, she had that like red scar tattoo on her face, and there was all this shit that was going on with ninjas from another dimension.
Yeah, that was before. In the
that
2000s,
was kind of
she had some cool stuff going on, and actually the House of M tie-in for Uncanny X-Men was like really weird, but it was like basically all about her and her family.
That was Claremont coming back and doing
in
that.
In the 90s, there was a term, Ninja Bimbo, and I kind of feel like Psylocke was one of the progenitors of that term, because she really got very badly misused in the night. Like, they took this character who's this British telepath, and they turned her into an Asian ninja telepath thing. Like, it was
also,
fucked.
they kept stripping her powers away because they put the Shadow King in her head, and she had to like use all of her telepathic ability to keep him trapped in there or something.
Through a large chunk of the 90s, she didn't really use her telekinesis. She'd use like the little psi knife thing to scramble people's brains. But, well, that's one of the problems I have with her. Is like, she looks Asian, so let's make her a ninja. It's like, but she's not a ninja. Not really.
Yeah.
She's still like wouldn't she still be a stuffy? Because they were like a rich, nice family.
Yeah,
so it's like, that's my problem is like you don't write her as if she's a stuffy rich British person, but that's still what I think she should be, because that's what she was initially designed as. And I mean, to me, that's more interesting if you had her in the shell that she's in now. But still, I don't know. She still be dripping sipping on some tea every once in a while and just being a little uppity and just I don't know. To me, that I don't
just
think
imagine her.
I actually don't think they write her very well. At least not usually. I haven't read like the new Uncanny X-Force.
Well, I liked her in Remender's run, and then the new Uncanny X-Force.
Remender stuff I loved.
It's her, and I think it's Puck and maybe Storm.
That I couldn't.
And a couple of other people.
Yeah, that I couldn't.
It's been pretty good.
Is it? Okay, I read the first one.
And Spiral shows up in that too.
So what's Phantom X was making out with himself, and that was
yeah. That's
like,
pretty fucking weird.
I'm done. I quit. I'll put up with some weird shit, but man, that's.
Yeah, I know. I'd recommend actually checking it out and like give it a little bit of time to develop, because it does get good. All
right, I'll give it another shot, I guess.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I enjoyed this story, but for me, like who I would recommend this to,
it's really not
don't know.
Not a superhero book.
No,
like it really doesn't fit well within the genre of superheroes.
No, I think the only people that I would really recommend this to are someone who's like, "Hey, where are Longshot and Mojo from?" And I'd be like, "Oh, they're from this book." And Spiral, here you go. You wanted the origin, but
I think like hardcore X-Men fans.
I think if somebody was like, I kind of like the idea of superheroes, but they don't seem really realistic to me, and I'm looking for kind of like a different depiction.
I would
of
recommend
the Marvel
this
universe.
So far down the line, even in that one, I would much rather recommend obviously Invincible, Empowered, Dynamo 5.
Well, I think that those are more in the direction of superheroes, and they're like they're a little bit of it. I mean, they're a more, I don't want to say realistic take, but
I mean, I know it would be weird,
a little bit more grounded. And this is it kind of feels like it's in the other direction, like it's a less superhero-y superhero universe, or not universe, but depiction. I guess
if you're into more satire, I would say, and if you're into a more densely packed story,
it's definitely like it's a weird read.
Yeah, because I still think that even if I was like trying to get somebody into comics who liked,
I definitely wouldn't recommend it to somebody who isn't experienced in comics.
Yeah, like I think I would much rather.
If somebody was like, I like modern comic books that I've read, but I don't really know anything about the history of comics. Like, what's older stuff that I read? Like, I would recommend The Ballad of Beta Ray Bill.
Yeah,
and I kind of feel like if you have read X-Men and you're like, I want to read older X-Men stuff, I'd be like, well, check out Longshot, because it kind of exists in this weird cross-section of things.
Yeah, I think that if they were a fan of modern X-Men, it would be like something worth maybe trying to get him into. There's a lot of stuff.
He's in X Factor.
Yeah, if you've been reading X Factor, so they just revealed
that's probably the best.
The origin of Longshot at the end of X Factor, and so that this would be a good kind of go back and get the history of that character.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of cool stories that were coming out around the same time too. So just kind of giving them a bunch of different stuff from this era of X-Men would be kind of interesting. But yeah, it's a hard. Yeah, it's hard for me to really
It sits in a very weird place.
Tell who would enjoy this or not, because I mean, I love X-Men and I love old comics, and I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't really get much from this. I liked the story, reading it. Just, because I like stories, I was like, oh, let's get to the end and see what happens. Well, that was cool. But I wasn't, rapidly turning pages, or nothing happened where I was like, oh, fuck, this book is cool. None of that really happened. So it was just kind of an interesting experience for me to read it. But
that's fair.
So that's what makes it hard for me to recommend, because I think I wouldn't sell it very well. I would just kind of be like, it's kind of weird, but it's fun, sort of, but it's not funny. It's kind of terrifying, actually, and it's horrible shit happens to pretty decent people in it. Read it? I don't know.
My mom had all the single issues when I was a kid, and so I read this several times when I was pretty young, and for whatever reason, it's just stuck in my brain.
Yeah, and a weird thing is, I would be so much more open to this if I was younger. And I don't feel like I'm old and crotchety or whatever, but I read this and I'm like, I have no idea what's happening in this universe. There's nothing solid going on in Arcade's universe. Or not Arcade, sorry, Mojo's universe. In the Mojoverse, I'm like, I have no ground for what that's supposed to be like. And as a kid, my imagination would fill in a lot more of the gaps than it does now, because I'm looking at it more critically than I would have looked at it as a kid. And so as a kid, I think I would have probably enjoyed the shit out of this. Just been yeah, cool. He throws knives and does backflips, and I'm into that.
I think I figured it out. The person that you recommended this to is the guy who walks into the comic shop and is like, I want to read about a guy with a mullet.
Yeah. Do you have any characters with hockey hair?
He definitely has that.
Yeah. Then, oh yes, I have one for you. I do love She-Hulk and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Although Doctor Strange is kind of a dick in this book. Yeah. He's one of my least favorite depictions of Doctor Strange.
To me, Doctor Strange done right he is a dick though. If you read the original Doctor Strange, he's a cocky motherfucker.
But I also feel like he should be more powerful, because in this he's kind of I saw some barbells and footballs. I thought this was a man's house, and it's you didn't look around any more than that. You just slightly glanced through the room and didn't use any of your psychic powers to feel who's present. I don't know. It just felt weird. It felt like he was being lazy and dickish. I mean, he does kind of save the day at parts.
It is a very different time.
Yeah, it was just he just kind of shows up and says stuff and then takes off, and it's I kind of like my Doctor Strange to be more active and
and he's
helpful.
I will totally heal Ricochet Rita, and then he gives her tea.
Yeah, he's inhale these herbs, and gives her tea, and he's just kind of walking around on the phone. He doesn't really he's not doing a big meditation circle. It seems like he's half-assing it. He's phoning it in.
Maybe he had something else going on that week, and so he's only kind of paying half attention.
Yeah. So I don't know, it's kind of weird, but I love She-Hulk. As a character, I'm a huge fan of her.
Did you hear that she's got a new series coming out?
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah,
she's got a new solo book that was just announced.
Her last solo book, I enjoyed.
Is that Dan Slott still at that point? Yeah.
And I feel like she's had some decent depictions, but she really needs her own book. She needs a good somebody to really take. So I'm excited for it. But I love her in this because she's jogging around. Gets in a fight with Lon. She just taps him on the shoulder.
Who's that dude? Bam!
And then punches him in the face, and it's yep, that's the She-Hulk I love. And then he throws his knives at her and traps her to a tree, and she's like, I hate to rip my designer sweater, and then rips it because she's a lawyer. Fuck, who cares?
Yeah.
And it's just great. She's just such a dichotomy of a character, because she's half superhero, half super strong rage monster, half brilliant lawyer. With supermodel good looks, so it's just this weird amalgam of a character.
And someone who's always really reveled in the fact that she's a 7 foot tall green woman. It doesn't bother her.
She hardly ever changes back. She's almost always
Wait, I didn't even know she could.
Sometimes she can.
My understanding is she can, but she just
likes
chooses
to be green?
chooses to
That's
be.
crazy.
Yeah,
At one point, pretty recently, I think S.H.I.E.L.D. injected her with nanites that would shut off her powers. But it wasn't exactly like she didn't want to.
Was it against her will?
I think so.
Yeah,
it
that
might have
sounds
been
like
Hammer.
yeah, yeah.
I honestly don't. It's like it was one issue that I
Yeah.
picked up randomly of
Yeah,
something.
because I've always loved that she just embraces her powers so well, and I think it's she's such in control of her anger, unlike her cousin, that when she does lose it, like in
Disassembled.
Disassembled, you're like, oh shit,
Oh yeah, that's
I
right.
forgot
Yeah,
that she's
yeah.
terrifying, a horrifying terror monster of smashing.
I gotta reread that now.
It's
so good.
Yeah, those panels where she just loses it are like really, really great
Yeah.
because it doesn't happen very often. It's not like the Hulk where every issue he's like, "Oh, I'm mad," and I love the Hulk, but they're two totally different characters. And like She-Hulk's great, so it's cool to see her in this. And Spider-Man shows up and does nothing in this book, so kind of a waste.
Yeah.
Oh, Spider-Man.
You kind of there's certain books where you just have to throw in Spider-Man or Wolverine just because it will
Hey,
sell.
there's
You know what I
an issue
mean?
of the original Transformers Marvel comic where Spider-Man shows up
Yeah.
because it was his job basically to guest star in everything.
Yeah.
He's still the number one.
It's like,
was it-
we have this new series and we want to get a sales boost. Let's put Spider-Man on the cover.
Well, it's kind of like Batman Brave and the Bold, wasn't it? Marvel team up, and then it just became Spider-Man team up after a while. Like,
yeah,
where he
there
was
was
basically,
that
like-
too.
Yeah.
There's actually a variation on the Kevin Bacon game with Spider-Man,
oh yeah,
which is actually kind of fun because
I-
he's crossed over with so much shit.
yeah.
Like basically everybody in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, anybody that
with
was
the
ever
DC
published.
crossovers, like everybody in the DC universe is within a couple degrees of him.
Yeah. And everything that's published under Marvel, so like old Conan stuff, like he shows up in that. Like,
Oh, they've had crossovers.
yeah, there's a Spider-Man Red Sonja trade.
Right.
Yeah, and that was within the last like 8 years.
That
or
was
something.
not only
I
So
think 8 years, like 4 years.
yeah,
Was it? No, I guess.
yeah, Spider-Man's everywhere, but he totally lends nothing to this book. Except my favorite moment in the whole book is when he's thinking, go ahead, Jonah, say it. He's like, it must be Spider-Man's fault. I just love J. Jonah Jameson so much. He's just a ridiculous character.
So, do we have anything else that we want to say about Longshot, or do we want to do recommendations?
I have one more note, and that's just the art in the beginning of this seems a little rougher than what I remembered from art items, but going through to issue 6, like I felt like it improved with every single issue, and by the end it was like the art items that I was more familiar with because I've read a ton of stuff that he's drawn. But I don't know. I remember the first issue I was a little surprised. It looked just a bit rough in places. But as it went along, it just kept polishing up. And by the end, it was like, there's the art items that I know and loved the entire time. So I guess it got more consistent as it went along.
One thing that I did notice reading through this again, like in the first issue, he's outside this leather shop, and there's just like totally like this fetish gear in the window.
Yeah.
That always seemed really weird to me.
Yeah, it just reminded me of Arrested. Anytime I see a leather store, I think of Arrested Development when he's like, do you have anything that says Daddy likes leather? You mean Leather Daddy? Is there such a thing? I just love Tobias.
Tobias.
Bunke. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Great character. But no, that was the weirdest thing because he gets this trench coat in that issue that he then like immediately discards.
Yeah.
Like he's just like wearing a trench coat and she's like, hey, you owe money. And he's like, who's that? And then he runs away. Like,
I don't know money.
yeah, he's just weird. And that's the thing about this book is it's so disjointed at parts that
That's true.
it never really felt like it got a great story flow going.
In the first issue, he finds that baby doll in that woman's house.
Yeah, with all the symbols on it.
And then, like, way later, he empties out his bag, and it shows just all this random shit that he's been collecting
Yeah.
over the issues. And he still has that fucking baby doll.
Yeah, he's just
Like, it's
weird.
so weird. And he's got, like,
Yeah.
a hammer and a tube of toothpaste and, like, diamonds. It's really odd.
Yeah, I mean, each one comes from each issue, I think.
Yeah,
like
he's got, like, a
toothpaste
Sharpie
diamonds
and a Eurythmics tape and a Donald Duck Pez dispenser.
weird.
Like, just all this random shit. A Gumby doll, golf ball, razor. I'm not going to list everything.
Yeah,
but
well,
just all this
it's
crap.
a
Like,
weird.
it was a
book.
weird moment.
The book is like feels super disjointed to me, and like I like it, but it never really gets its flow going because it's just like, oh, now there's I'm in a leather store stealing stuff to show that I don't.
I kind of
have.
wonder what that series would be like if they had continued it.
Yeah, and
beyond
also
6 issues.
I just feel also like it could have been streamlined a little bit. Like it's a little too decompressed, but then also parts of it feel totally rushed because like you don't get a good feeling of like what's going on during some of the fight scenes. Like he's in the underground, the headquarters of that power company, and there's like all the demons are in, or not demons, but like the animal faced monsters or whatever.
Yeah,
are
I mean,
in
they're
there.
demons.
And they show up and they fight him. And then they disappear or something, and he's like, well, that's a weird cable company. And he, like, never goes to investigate the fact that, like, why are they there? What are they doing? Like, he's just, like, I mean, he's not Batman. Like, he's not a detective.
He's definitely not Batman.
He just kind of wanders around doing weird shit. And the book that I read the most from this time period is Constantine, is Hellblazer. And so it reminds me of that a little bit, where he'll just, like, kind of wander into problems or whatever. But John, like, fixes shit. Like, that's what he's there to do. Like, weird shit shows up, and then he's like, oh, I'll take care of this. Let me solve it. I'll open a portal and talk to a demon or whatever. And in Longshot, he's just like, bye, fellow humans, and, like, runs away. And, like, he's trying to be buddy-buddy with these people that he has no connection to because he's a genetic slave, robot thing. I mean, he's not a robot, but he's, like, engineered species of thing, but he feels such a connection to humans for some reason because he looks similar. So
he's very childlike. I mean, that's
super.
Even now that's how he comes across, and that's part of, he doesn't really think too much about consequences and things like this. Like, I like you, we're friends, why are you mad at me? I'm gonna go now, okay, bye. Like, kind of short attention. He is a giant child. Kind of. That's one thing. Like, when I started reading X-Men, Longshot was in the book, and so I guess I have a weird affinity for the character just because when I was a little kid, like, I like this guy, he's weird, he's got a shiny eye. But reading as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's part of it. I think is he is a child. He's a giant man child.
Well, really. His memory keeps getting erased essentially, so like he has no context.
His cognitive function, even, he seems like he's just more development wise, more like a child-like state of understanding.
This weird alien dog said one time that we were friends, so I'm going to believe that even when he tries to kill me.
Yeah. Like, why are you mad at me? He's like trying to straight bite his face off or something.
It's so weird. I don't know. He's an interesting character.
It's even in X Factor, he still kind of comes across like that kind of lackadaisical, just kind of super chilled out, and like, because he has a psychic imprint thing he can do too, they once or twice in there, and I don't know, like X Factor be like, oh yeah, I can do that, and like, I almost forgot. I don't know, he still comes across that way.
He'll touch an object and basically see the past of that object or something, or what's been psychically imprinted on it. It's weird.
It is.
But his just like undying optimism though is basically what gets him through the whole story.
Well, it's what his luck powers are based on.
It's really interesting. I don't know. It was a different story.
Okay.
I think we've said most of what we want to say, though. You want to move on to recommendations?
Sure.
Okay, do you want to go first?
Sure. So when I was reading this, I was reminded of a DC book from years earlier that is kind of weird and wacky in the same kind of way, but done differently. Mm-hmm. And that is Justice League of America, Zatanna's Search. This was the introduction of Zatanna to the DC universe. And it takes place over a bunch of different books, like Hawkman #4, Detective Comics 335 and 336, Atom 19, and Green Lantern 42. It's just like, it's Zatanna going in search of her father. And
Zatara, right?
Zatara.
Yeah.
And just these weird, wacky things happen. And it's definitely Silver Age, written by Gardner Fox. Lots of different artists, because it was whoever was writing the books that she was featured in, or whoever was drawing the books she was featured in. So it's got like Bob Kane and Gil Kane and something Anderson. I'm trying to remember.
It's like super old school stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
Copyright 1964, 65, 66, 67, and 80.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of
So this is like super old
This is
school.
all
Yeah.
pre-crisis.
Yep. And it's she was introduced in the Silver Age, which is interesting because she's a character of magic introduced into a very like scientific based universe.
Oh yeah,
the
the
Silver Age
was way more.
the Golden Age was all magic. A lot of their like the Golden Age Flash is
Yeah.
magically powered. The Golden Age Green Lantern magically.
No, the
powered.
Golden Age Flash
It's hard
got his
water,
power from
which is
inhaling
not
hard
anything,
water.
really, but
Yeah, but his his
But
powers seem to
like
be-
Green Lantern is magic based.
Yeah,
Oh, they retcon that later, but
Yeah.
initially, it was.
Tobiah
magic-based,
opened up to a page which just cracks me up. It had at the bottom panel a group hug between Batman, Green Lantern, and Zatanna, and it's
Nice.
just like Batman and Green Lantern hugging. That's
He's not trying to punch him in the
Yeah.
face. Like,
A
but
very
yeah,
different Batman.
and the Silver Age was much more scientifically based. With the Flash getting his powers from the chemical.
Brian Bowen.
Yeah,
cover,
and
nice.
like Martian Manhunter, the Alien,
Yeah,
and Green Lantern was
Yeah.
now like Space Cop.
yeah, and so it's interesting to see her as a magical character in a science universe is kind of different. So I've always loved Zatanna. I always thought she was like one of the best DC female characters for
she's
sure.
one of mine.
So,
But yeah,
This
weird, wacky superhero hijinks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I just think it's unfortunate that they've never really been able to find a good costume for her.
I have no
stage
problem with-
magician costumes always seem so weird to me.
I have no problem with that costume. I don't know why. I mean, I guess everybody else in the DC universe has like really weird costumes too. So, I mean, it does not bother me at all that she's. I mean, there have been people with much worse costumes that are going around in the DC universe. I think, and I think
I guess I kind of feel like at this point they could just give her pants.
sure. I like the fishnets though. I mean, I don't find them to be like that weird. I don't know. I've always liked her costume. I always thought it was really good. Her costume now is really weird. I was reading Justice League Dark, and she wears the fishnets on her arms
What?
and has pants on.
That's
And
weird.
It's worse.
It's like
I imagine it would have to be.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know what you're doing. This is weird.
One of my favorite things ever in comics is when they give Wonder Woman pants every once in a while. The last time being like 5 years ago, and people lose their shit completely.
Yeah.
you can't. Wonder Woman can't wear pants. Like they just like freak out. I
Yeah,
just love it. It's like the best thing ever.
Wonder Woman
Well,
Wonder Woman wearing pants seems like not that big of a deal to me because like I like it when she wears pants because it's like I would wear pants.
Looks fine to me.
But for Zatanna,
yeah.
it seems like she's just wearing short shorts and fishnets, and it's
Yeah.
like I know people that wear that, so like that doesn't seem weird to
Yeah,
me at all.
it's
like
not
it
really
feels
a
like a costume,
Yeah,
fashion
magician
faux
costume.
pas.
Well, that's her thing. Was she was always hiding in plain sight,
right?
which makes sense.
I
Yeah.
don't want to cast aspersions on people I don't know, but a friend of ours, Eric Troutman, who is a writer in the comic book industry, was
Yeah.
writing Vampirella for a while. And
He put
he
her
took
in
her out of the
clothes.
bathing suit and put her into actual clothes. Like
Yeah.
she had a shirt
Yeah.
and pants.
In a coat.
And there was a segment of the audience of that comic that just lost their fucking minds.
Well,
he's talked about the hate mail that he got.
Yeah, he's
Like,
also talked about how hard it was to convince editorial to like want to put that on a cover.
Yeah.
And
Like for a number of issues
Yeah.
after he made that change on the inside, they were still putting out bathing suit covers.
right.
And I kind of feel like Wonder Woman's got to be the same way. Like there's a segment
yeah.
of the fan base for that character that just wants to see her in a bathing suit.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of like fanboys of female characters that are the same way, but I don't know. It feels a lot different for me. Zatanna's costumes always felt like it makes sense for what she is because she's a magician, but Wonder Woman is a warrior.
Well-
so when they put her in armor and with a shield and an axe and stuff, I'm like, that makes sense. Like
Our
that's-
world's at war. Armor is the shit.
Yeah, it's like that's
to me
Wonder
always
Woman. That's
looks
so much
awesome.
fucking cooler.
Yeah,
and then
it
they put her
is.
back in a bathing suit, and I'm like, I don't
But
understand.
Zatanna's costume, I mean, her entire character is basically just a distaff version of her father, who
Right.
is in a stage magician's costume. Like it's a
Right.
tuxedo with a cape.
Right.
Yeah.
And they just made a female version of that.
Yeah.
And that's her costume.
Yeah, and I think that it's a cool like kind of family legacy thing too because her cousin Zatara, who's same name as her dad.
Well, that's their last name. Her name is
Zatanna Zatara.
That's her name, yeah.
Right, and then his name is Zatara. His name is like
His name is it's Giovanni Zatanna, I think.
it's anyway, it's confusing. But her cousin's costume,
Giovanni Zatara, yeah.
his his costume is like just a stage musician costume as well. So it's kind of like when all the different Green Lanterns have like slightly different costumes from one another.
Well,
it's like, it reminds me of that kind of.
They're
like
a military
family.
organization.
Yeah.
That's a uniform.
Right. But all the Flashes have similar uniforms. All Batmans have similar uniforms. All the Robins have... Like, it ties into that, like, DC legacy really well to me. But there's only one Wonder Woman. And when she goes back to...
Well, there's Wonder Girl.
Yeah.
And Wonder Tot.
And Wonder Girl wears nothing similar to Wonder Woman. And,
well, she used to.
Way back in the Golden Age era, she would wear like a really similar costume. But then when she became, she just used her name
Donna. When it became Donna Troy,
right? She wore the sparkly jumpsuit, and then the new Wonder Girl like had
jeans.
had pants.
Yeah.
That, now she has jeans.
Is that Cassie?
Cassie had pants first.
Yeah, I guess
they
she had
put
like
her in
the red tights.
Yeah, and it was a good costume. And when Wonder Woman goes back to Themyscira, nobody's dressed like her.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't fit in with her own legacy, and that's what really bothers me about Wonder Woman. It's like, I don't know.
I suppose that's all fair.
I mean, and Mara's costume is essentially a skin-tight jumpsuit, but then, like, so is Aquaman. Like, there's a linear, there's, like, sort of a reason. Like, I can make a leap of faith into that and be like, I understand why she's wearing that.
Yeah.
But Wonder Woman is the one that never made sense to me.
It's a swimsuit, yeah.
She should be in armor. I love it when she...
Patriotic swimsuit at that, and she's not American.
Yeah, and that it's like her costume makes the least amount of sense of anyone, and that bothers me. And I've always liked Zatanna's costume because it's so different. Like, she's not dressed like a superhero. I like that. I think that's cool. It's like Big Barda's costume too. Like, really sets her apart from.
Well, she's got a couple of different costumes.
Yeah, I like the classic.
There's that
like
brownish like one piece bathing suit that she has with the cutout portions, and then there's her armor.
I like her armor, the red and yellow and
That's
the
what I was
blue.
thinking of,
And she wears the
designs.
giant helmet and has the hammer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Big Barda. I love the Fourth Ward characters in general. Like, I think their costumes are really good. So she totally fits into that kind of design aesthetic too. So I don't know. Wonder Woman's just always bothered me with her costume. She needs pants.
Okay,
totally agree with that one. But
well, that's
I'm willing to
Zatanna's search.
I'm willing to defend Zatanna's costume because I think it's cool.
So I brought something. It's Marvel, but it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
It's collected under the title Wolverine Legends Volume 5. But it's collecting a 5-issue miniseries that was called Wolverine Snicked. Mm-hmm. And this was put out, like, I want to say like 10 years ago, and it's written and drawn by a well-known manga artist named Tsutomu Nihai. And the art is really different than what you would see in a normal Marvel comic. And basically, this girl shows up, and she's like, hey, Wolverine, we need your help. And he's like, okay. And she grabs him and takes him into the future that has been ruined. And there's these like horrible monsters that are taking over the world. And the only thing that can hurt them is adamantium. So they grab the dude with the adamantium claws and they're like, we have this one chance to not be driven to extinction. Please help us. And it's Wolverine murdering these horrible monsters in the ruins of the future. And it's just kind of weird and different and a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I'm the best at what I do, and what I do isn't pretty.
Yeah, and it's cool too because the art is still feels very Western, even though it's drawn by a manga artist.
Yeah, it's kind of this weird
colored.
crossbreed.
Yeah, it doesn't look like manga, and it doesn't really look like Western comics either. It's interesting.
And it's very, I think, outside of what you would normally get from a Marvel book.
Yeah, and I think that's what's cool about having kind of Marvel's miniseries where they just kind of are willing to play with stuff, and why we'll never see anything like this from DC.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of one of those interesting things where it's like Wolverine one day just randomly goes to this adventure to the future, and like he never really talks about it because it's not part of the main continuity. But you totally get the sense with a character like Wolverine, like you see him, like he's in the Avengers, he's on X-Force, he's with the X-Men, and sometimes he just randomly goes to the future. Like he just always has these random adventures, kind of in between everything else. Like it feels very right to the character.
Yeah, totally. Cool.
Well, he does a lot of shit. I mean,
yeah. Well, he's the best there is at what he does.
What he does is be in every Marvel book every month.
Multitasking. It's a superpower.
Multitasking.
Yeah,
is the real
we don't know
power.
if he has to sleep or not.
Well,
We don't
and
really
you
know
also got to
much.
think, like, he doesn't really have a job. He's Wolverine. So what does he do when he's bored? He goes, kills
Yeah.
shit in the future.
Goes
Yeah.
to the bar with Juggernaut and Colossus and gets drunk.
Yeah.
One of my favorite X-Men issues ever.
Well, with his healing factor, shouldn't he like not be able to get drunk? Really?
I think that's why he drinks all the time.
just because you'd think you would
Because you'd have to like maintain.
You couldn't
that
even
buzz.
get a buzz. Yeah. You would
Also, yeah, I mean, I'm sure
My
that takes
liver
quite a
is
bit of
healing
energy.
over and over.
Beer has a lot of calories in
think.
it.
Yeah. So I keep his girlish figure.
So what did you bring, Eric?
First, I want to pitch Joe's book. He.
Oh, that.
Oh, he always
Weasel.
does.
I know.
Like, I don't want to record here. Pitch my book for me.
My book, bitch. All right.
I told him that he shouldn't just because he could recommend it next week and we might pick it.
So we'll see how well I do. He wanted me to pitch Daredevil, Man Without Fear, which was a 1993 update of Daredevil's origin, written by Frank Miller and drawn by John Romita Jr. It's actually one of my personal favorite Daredevil stories. I really love it. But it's just, if you like Batman Year One, that kind of thing, it's a similar vibe, but it's basically Daredevil in college mainly, meeting Elektra Natchios for the first time. If I recall, it's not actually considered in canon anymore because a lot of the Elektra stuff they've kind of tweaked later. But Miller's the guy who invented Elektra, so I'll let him kind of go with that one. It's a great story. It's a lot of fun. I love John Romita Jr.'s art. It's a very, very beautiful book. A lot of young Foggy Nelson, young Matt Murdock in college, young Elektra, kind of pre-hand and all that stuff. I wish I had the books I could actually show you. But yeah, it's a fun read.
Well, this was
really great.
when was this put out? It was
93.
like 90s?
93, yeah.
Okay. I think I remember this one.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was one of those books they hyped to death at the time.
How many? It was like 4 issues?
I think it was 5 or 6.
Okay.
5 or 6 per book. I want to say it was like 5. It was definitely a miniseries.
Yeah.
And it was this own, self-contained miniseries. Yeah, so that's Joe's book. I hope I pitched it adequately.
Awesome.
My book is Supreme, the story of the year. Supreme was one of those god-awful Image rip-off characters. The thing with Image is they usually ripped off Marvel characters, and Supreme was very blatantly a Superman rip-off. I mean, just you look at him and it's like totally obvious. The reason this is a good book, though, is they brought in, they being Rob Liefeld, he brought in Alan Moore to write Supreme, and the caveat he had was, cool, I get to throw out everything and do whatever the hell I want, which was probably the best thing for the book, because my understanding, having not read the old Supreme, was he was just this hyper-violent, crazy, killer, psycho Superman, kind of almost similar to what they've done with the Sentry, but even more extreme than that, I guess. But Alan Moore, what he does with this, it's almost like the opposite of what he does with Watchmen. This it turns into a love letter to Silver Age Superman is really what it is. It's really cool because it actually goes into the concept that there are multiple Supremes. And so like the whole multiverse thing that he's talked about in Captain Britain and other books in the past is in this. There's actually a place called the Supremium where all the Supremes that came before from all the different versions of the comic do exist. So there's like Sister Supreme, this African American female Supreme from the 70s, and there's like this like giant cartoon mouse Supreme from like the 1950s when like wacky animals were like a thing, and there's Macro Supreme, that's just gigantic stone Supreme, there's like Micro Supreme, and the same thing, there's Darius Dex, I think is his villain, which is totally his Lex Luthor, but there's multiple versions of Darius Dex. One of them's like an evil duck, and so it's like it's just in even just the way the books are laid out, there's sections of the book that look very, because like people will be like, oh, you're 90s revisionist Supreme, that's what they call him. So I'm like, oh, so even when the book was happening, because it was like 97 or something, it's like that's the version of the character that you are. So he's like self-aware that he is just one of many versions of this character. And
Crazy.
Yeah, it's actually it's pretty deep for a superhero book. And
well, it's Alan Moore.
It's Alan Moore. It's like honestly, it's one of the last good things Alan Moore did, in my opinion. This is late 90s into the early 2000s here. And even it being awesome couldn't prevent the company from going out of business, because at this point Liefeld had left Image and started. It was either called Awesome or Awesome Comics or something stupid like that was the name of it. And it went out of business.
It wasn't Epic.
It was. I think it was called Awesome Comics. It was something stupid like that. And it went out of business, and so the story never even fully finished. But there's 2 trade paperbacks. They're both quite large. The follow-up is called The Return.
And the art's really interesting. I was just flipping through it because it changes like issue by issue, but it seems like it changes more for mood and feel.
Even within the issue, it's like he'll have like a flashback, and it'll be set up like if you've ever read old like Silver Age Superman, even the way the panels lay out, that's how the books looked back then. So it'll be like, oh, this is a Legion of Superheroes style story. This is a Superboy style story, and so he'll consciously. There's a ton of artists on this book, and it's definitely it's intentional.
Yeah,
and even so far as like the '90s stuff looking very '90s, even being self-aware at the time, but then going back and even like the color palette and stuff being a little. Different for the older style stuff. No, I loved it because to me this is like instead of tearing down superheroes and deconstructing, which is kind of like what Alan Moore's famous for, this is more like, hey, this is why I love superheroes, and it's almost more of a celebration of it. So that's one of the things I really love about it, because like I love Watchmen, it's one of my favorite books ever, but like Supreme is like the best Alan Moore book that most people have not read, because a lot of people haven't read this book, and it's really fantastic, I think.
It reminds me of like Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow and like Top 10, where it's more about like how cool it can be
totally
to tell superhero stories.
Is this has like his version of Supergirl in it, and his version of Crypto, and a lot of those elements, and he delves really into. It's basically like if he was allowed to really write the best Superman stories ever, that's really what this is. But since it's not Superman, he can kind of get more meta with it and go a little more extreme with some of the violence and some of the story stuff. But it's all the elements are there, like kryptonite, but it's not kryptonite. All that stuff is so cool. Really, it's like the best Superman stories ever. Is really what it is.
Cool.
Crazy.
Very cool.
What do you got, Chard?
I brought a modern book from Image Comics. This is called Revival. It's written by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton, 2 guys we've talked about a lot. Tim Seeley's part of 4 Star Comics, which is the digital company that we've talked about quite a bit, or that I've mentioned a lot of times. But Revival is essentially, it's set in the small town of Wausau, Wisconsin, and something strange has happened in this town, and people can't die, or certain people can't die, and they're called revivals or revivalists. And it's not like zombies where they come back from the dead and try to eat the flesh of who's around. It's just they fall over dead, and then they get up, and it's like they weren't killed. There's nothing has really changed about them. They're like they're still the people that they were before they died. And so the town has been locked down. The CDC is investigating, like, what is this weird virus? Obviously, there's a lot of religious people that are like, oh, this is the rapture. There's the FBI doesn't really quite know how to handle it. The country's kind of on watch on the small town, and it focuses around the story of this woman who is a police officer in the town who's trying to just kind of figure out what's going on. It's a little bit of a horror book, a little bit of a thriller, a lot of like cool supernatural, like, oh, what's going on? What's happening? There's some weird creatures that are kind of showing up that it isn't clear, and it's an ongoing series. The first 2 trades are out now. I've only read the first trade. I really like it. The art's really interesting. Mike Norton is an artist who was an artist for DC for a long time before the New 52. I really like his stuff. It's not quite as polished as it was in DC when it was DC because the budget is not as high at Image, but I really like the art. Like, he's able to convey a lot with the characters, I think. And it's just a really interesting story, and it's kind of like what's going on? Why can't people die, and why do some people die but other people don't die? And it's just it's a really interesting story. It's a different take on the whole idea of mortality, and it kind of taps into that. And as someone who's like really interested in like the ability to live forever, I just like that kind of concept for a character. I think the book is really interesting, so I'm totally into it, and I'm definitely going to keep reading it, so keep an eye out for it.
Okay.
Revival at Image.
Cool.
It's really good. Cade, what do you want to read?
I really want to read Revival. That looks awesome as hell.
Okay. I'm going to vote for Supreme.
All right. Eric, what do you want to read?
I'm going to go Revival. I've had that one recommended a bunch of times.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, when I picked it up at the shop, Allison was like, "Oh, read it. It's good."
Allison's the key person.
Well, because she's a big fan of Hack Slash, and so am I. And
yeah.
Tim Seeley wrote Hack Slash, so it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I was totally going to vote for Supreme, so that would tie. It's Joe. Do you think we should call Joe?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think he lost the right to vote.
Yeah.
He's lucky that we even pitched his book for him.
All right. Well, then I'm going to vote for Snicked because I've never read Supreme. I totally want to read it. It slipped through the cracks on me for sure. And
Bring it back, Eric.
yeah, I want to read that one. And then I've totally read like a lot of Zatanna's Search because I love those old Silver Age stories. So that stuff's great. I love the old JLA books. And cool. So
awesome. So Revival.
Yeah.
Next
Next
week
week we'll read Revival, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for listening. Make sure if you're listening, you're enjoying the show, write an iTunes review, like us on Facebook, Twitter to your friends that we're cool.
do all that good stuff.
Do the fun things that internets do, and
make up a big sign and go out and hold it up on the street.
Yeah,
and tell people to listen to us.
Stand next to the guys that twirl signs for restaurants, but just hold up a sign for our podcast.
I think this guy's totally listening to our podcast.